Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. I am Terri DeNeui, and today we're going to have a conversation about men, one of my favorite topics. Why is it important for men to understand about hormones and what hormones are important for men? So it's so important for couples. It's so important for relationships, but I really wanted a male perspective. So I invited my husband, Dan DeNeui, in on the conversation today. He's a CEO of several companies, and I'm really excited to get his perspective. So women, grab your husbands, your partner, your significant other, and come join us for this conversation of why hormones are important for men. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. Today, I'm very excited to bring a little masculine energy to the show, and I thought, who better to have the conversation about hormones and testosterone and all of these things in men than my husband, Dan DeNeui. So welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I just saw you this morning.
I know, I really appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So, obviously, we're going to talk about hormones in men today, and I just thought, I'd ask you a couple of questions, and I want to take it back to, when we both kind of just started on this journey when I was just bringing it into my clinic, and you were a little younger at an age where I don't need this testosterone thing, and then eventually, after you heard me kind of talking a couple of times, you thought, well, maybe I should get this checked out. So, just kind of take me back to that, about your initial, journey and learning about it, and just your initial impressions, and what kind of changed your mind that made you kind of think that this might be something you want to look into.
Well, I would say, in my mind, I kind of had this magic number of 40, because I think we met when I was 39. Mm-hmm. Maybe, was it 39? 38, like something like that. Anyway, and so, of course, I went to hear a lot of your lectures. I listened to a lot of your patient seminars. And the things that you were talking about, I just hadn't really paid attention to before, right? Your brain's not working like it. You just couldn't remember names and things like that. And, I'm a business guy. And so what was important is to remember things when you're in the boardroom. Remember names when you meet people and things like that. And so when you start talking about the memory piece of it, I was like, well, yeah, I guess really I need to pay attention to that. So that's one of the things that you start. I don't think guys think about.
Yeah, that's a thing that guys tell me all the time, is just like, I don't know, my brain to mouth isn't connected. I can't. It's on the tip of my tongue. That's a big one that they talk about. And just being able to kind of stay focused, because for men, I'm gonna pull out a little Alison Armstrong. For men, men are very single focused, and so when you're focusing on a task, you're trying to produce a result. One of the things a lot of guys complain about is that ability to focus on producing that result. You feel really distracted. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, distracted and not being able to, just stay concentrated on really what you're saying. As you are a CEO, right? You're the other side of it that I saw was the energy level as a business guy. As you get older, you have some great ideas and you have great wisdom. But you may not have the energy to actually follow through on all of that kind of ideas. And so I always tell people, if you can still feel young when you're older and in a position of power, a CEO, or not, maybe it doesn't have to be a position of power, but influence. Yeah. You're a business person and you have good ideas. You're still building a business, or you're working on any kind of a project. You want to be able to have the clarity of mind. Right. You want to be able to have, remember things, but you want to also have the energy to be able to take, oh, that was a great idea. I have the wisdom because I'm older, and now I have the energy that I can put into that project or that business or whatever. And so these are the things I think that, because guys don't think about that aspect of it right away, they always think about hormones, libido, sexual function, erectile function, things like that.
And that's important.
I mean,
but what
I think it's very important.
It's very important, especially for relationships.
Correct.
But it's reminding me of, I had a patient one time, And, I saw him initially and, we got him tweaked or whatever. When I saw him again, he used almost that exact analogy. And he said, I have the energy and the vitality and the focus of my youth with the wisdom to know what to do. That's
exactly right. You said it more succinctly.
Yeah, there you go. So, but that's just such a great descriptor. And you're right. I love, you just kind of was a great lead into the next part of that conversation is there's this misconception that testosterone is all about sexual function, although obviously that's a big part of it, but and that's a key part for relationships, and especially men and vitality. I think those are kind of obvious, and we can definitely talk about that. I think it's important to talk about. But some of the other things, that you experienced, like that you didn't really realize maybe were related to this, I've heard this from a lot of people, and I think you've said it too. I didn't realize how not bad I felt, but how not great I felt until I got my testosterone levels up, and now there's things that are gone that I didn't realize before. Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, because the decrease is so gradual with men, it's kind of like the frog in the pot of boiling water.
Yeah.
You don't realize that it's getting hotter and hotter, and all of a sudden, the frog is dead. So hormones are the same way, I think, for guys, because we're kind of taught throughout our lives, be tough, work through it, gut it out, work hard, deal with pain, deal with, resistance. I mean, that's how males are really, that's how we're brought up. And so you get tired, but you push your way through it. Right. You get frustrated, but you push your way through it. You don't feel like, doing something, and you still force yourself to do it. So that statement of, I didn't realize how bad I felt until I felt good again, 100%. Tell a real quick story. I have a friend of mine, his name is Bobby. And for years, he knows what we do. He's been around us, so see him at the gym all the time. And for years, I talked to him about pellet therapy, and hormone optimization really is what we do, rather than hormone replacement therapy. And he just didn't do it. And, I'll get it. I'll get there. Yeah. Kind of like, well, I'll get there eventually. I don't need it. I'm young. So he finally gets his blood tests, and he's like surprised that his hormones are so far out of whack. Gets a procedure done. I see him at the gym, 4 weeks later. I didn't know. I had no idea that he had done this. And came up to him, I was like, bro, you look good. You've slimmed down. You look more muscular, you look more trim. And he goes, I finally went and did the pellet thing. He calls it the pellet thing. And I was like, you did? Congratulations. I go, well, I can already tell it. He goes, I just don't understand why you didn't sell me on that harder.
That's funny.
And I was like, wait, I'm not going to go do it for you. Did
you not tell him you're 80? Like, come on, look
exactly.
at you.
I'm 80 years old, Bobby. You should pay attention to this. But anyway, and so I think that's for a lot of guys. And the other thing too, I would add, the word hormone for some guys is just like, they can't take it. And I understand that. I mean, there's a stigma that's associated with that. Right. Oh, that's women in menopause.
That's good.
Well,
true.
The fact of the matter is, and you say it in your book, men need testosterone much as women do, vice versa, and to not, to treat menopause and never treat andropause is, in my estimation, kind of malpractice from practitioners.
Yeah. That's a really great lead in, to this conversation of, couples doing this together. And, speak to a little bit about, I want to get into the relationship aspect because it's really important. Because when one person is feeling good and up and the other one's still down, it doesn't work as well. Right. One person has a libido. But there's two things you said that are really interesting that I kind of want to touch on a little bit more. And one is this mindset, or this, I guess, myth that men think, well, if I have a sex drive, my testosterone must be good, and so many men and women, I've had women say, oh, my husband doesn't need any more testosterone. He's chasing me around enough. I'm like, it's not about that. It is, but it isn't. So, in my experience, men kind of don't really ever lose the desire but it's that, that's the ability, the worth it equation. It's like, it's going to take a lot of effort or whatever, kind of.
Got to climb the mountain.
You got to climb the mountain. Yeah. I've heard you use that phrase before. So it's not just about, sexual health and sexual function, although that's a key part. But there's another thing that you've talked about, I've heard you talk about with people, and that's the stress aspect. Because when stress is kind of, we're all dealing with a lot of stress, but I've heard you talk about the impact and how differently you deal with stress and how you can feel stress differently when you're, testosterone up versus down or whatever. So talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a really important topic.
So if you think about stress, it affects every part of it. It affects your sleep many times. It affects your dialogue, just back and forth, just simple conversations, right? Sure. So what I found, and I explain it very simply from a standpoint of when I am low on testosterone, when I'm not optimized with my hormones, because hormones affect so much, as you've discussed many times. But when my hormone levels are off, not optimized, I feel like, and this is the best way to explain it, is you ever have somebody close talk you and they have coffee breath and they're like right here, and you're just like, bro, if you don't stand back really quick, we're going to have a problem, And so that's how I feel with stress when my hormones are off. I feel like stress is just like in my face.
Right.
I get pellets. I do the regime. I do the Evexias method as you teach it. And now I still stress. It doesn't mean I have less stress. I'm a CEO of a couple of different companies, and the stress is now here. It's like I can manage it. I can deal with somebody with coffee breath if they're 3 feet away. But if they're in my face,
you'll never forget the coffee.
No, you
breath.
won't. And you'll think about it the next time you feel stressed out, because that's exactly what it feels like. And I'm like, if I can get that stress away from me, then I'm in this nice bubble where I can be me and I can be my best self in dealing with stress and in dealing with whatever the stuff that I have to deal with. So again, these are other things that guys just we don't think about these pieces of hormone. Again, you keep coming back to sexual function, desire, things like that. And you say it's a major part of it. For me, over the years, what I've really started telling people is that although it is, that's kind of like icing on the cake. That's kind of like the great stuff, the bonus to it. The other things are just so, and a lot of times they're just not recognized.
Right. Yeah. Just the subtle things like, the stress being right here, and men even can get the blues and the blahs, Absolutely. Another thing I've heard guys say throughout the years is the things I really like to enjoy doing, I don't even care about, riding my motorcycle or going to play golf or going fishing. I'm like, I'd just rather, lay back on the recliner and just, click through or scroll through social or whatever. So, let's transition into the relationship piece, because even the conversation about stress and moods for men and women, and we've seen this, when stress is right here for you because your hormones aren't optimized, you're probably not your best self in any of your relationships.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So,
absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that and what you've seen. Even we can just openly talk about our own, because we try to stay in sync. It's real important because we work together, we're married, and we're able to tell. We've been doing this long enough. We can tell when it's like, when's the last time you got your hormones checked, kind of thing. But it plays a big role in relationships. And I've heard you talk about this in other settings about how important it is as we get older and we have all this wisdom to have the energy and the vitality to pass that on. So just talk a little bit about that, because, we talk about the symptoms, we talk about, what it feels like when you aren't optimized as a male and what it feels like when you are. But we're moving into a new stage in our life where we're grandparents. We just had a couple of new babies born this year, and we're at a stage in our life where that's more exciting because we're just getting to where we're able to part that on. So talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a really important piece that a lot of people don't understand or think about.
The interaction with your spouse, the interaction with your kids, your grandkids, that's your legacy. I mean, that's your legacy. And are you really making an impact in those people's lives, or are you looked at as someone that is the grumpy old man, and unfortunately there's many people in the audience that know, my dad or my granddad, he was the grumpy old man.
Right.
Well, I've determined in my life and in our lives, we're not going to be the grumpy old grandparents, right? We're going to be vibrant and enjoy life. We're going to be interactive with our kids and our grandkids. We're still going hunting and golfing and fishing and all the activities that we want to enjoy. And by the way,
creating memories,
all of that. And in those times when you have the energy to engage like that, that's the time where you have an impactful conversation with your kids, your grandkids.
Right.
Conversely, what do you see in society? Grandma comes to Thanksgiving dinner and she's on 12 different medications. Right. She's in a wheelchair. She's got a colostomy bag. She's gorked out of her mind. She doesn't know anyone's name. And this is how we are, quote unquote, aging in this country. And so this is our passion. Right. I could get going on all this stuff. I try to stay focused on really the question. But I mean, you have to step back and go, what does society look like continuing on that trajectory? And so this is, again, what our life's work is about, and the excitement in really educating people on what true proactive healthcare looks like. But anyway, I kind of got off track there on your question, but it's all interrelated.
Points. Yeah, it's all interrelated. And one of the things that, points you're making, you just reminded me of, is all of that wisdom that has come along with our 50 plus years of life that we want to be able to pass on. And when you get in the 6th decade and the 7th decade, when you really look at life a little bit differently, right. To be able to have the vitality and the energy to do that and to really, care about that. I had one guy, a male patient that is just really making, he has a big calling on his life, making a big impact in the world. And I remember when he first came to my office and he sat down and he said, I've got this thing I'm doing. It's a big thing, but I just I'm tired and I'm ready to retire. Mm. And so I've heard this can really help me out. So no pressure, but this better work, kind of thing.
Fix me or I'm out.
Fix me or I'm out. And I was like, well, that's a lot of pressure because you have a lot of gifts to share with the world still. And that's really what it's about, right? We have so many gifts to share with the world. And no matter what decade of life you're in, especially as a male, and especially in this day and age when we need men to speak into our young men and teach women how to honor men. And there's just so much breaking down the family unit and breaking down masculinity, to be able to have the energy and the vitality to really speak that life into the next generation, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, the kids, as we call them, that, work at our businesses or whatever. You got to have the vitality to do that. And that story about my patient that was ready to, throw in the towel when he had so much more still to give to the world.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning, right? Now that person is older,
right,
has more wisdom and more understanding, life experience to share with the world at 70 versus 50 or 40, and now has the energy, right, and the focus and the desire, right, to actually do that. So I think that's just extremely, extremely powerful.
That's great. Well, we can't have a conversation about hormones with men or women without talking about the intimacy piece, the sexual function piece, that kind of thing. And one of the first things I'll say is, and we hear this all the time, but, couples that do this together, it's a much more fun journey.
Couples should do this together.
Couples should do this together. Because, like I said, if you've got a man, and I just had a couple come in, the other day, and the man was already on a form of testosterone doing shots, and he's just like, I just can't keep being up here when my wife is down here. It is not good for our relationship.
Well, not even, and I know you're speaking to the sex piece of it, but just the interaction, right? So if I'm happy all the time and I'm feeling good and I'm feeling energetic and I want to go do stuff and you're just like, wanting to sit around the house and, watch Netflix or something. I mean, nothing wrong with doing that every now and again, but that's all you want to do. Yeah. It's problematic.
Yeah, it's problematic. And it's and I've heard it so many times from, men saying, and even women, but a lot of men saying, you gave me my wife back. I married this person 20, 30 years ago and we had common interest and we did fun things together and, she had vitality and I had vitality and now it's just kind of, we've both gone like this or I've gotten fixed and she's not, or mostly what happens is I fix the wife and then she's dragging the husband because now she's, chasing him around the house and wanting to do stuff no matter what it is. And he's just like, kind of dragging along. So the importance of just both, couples being on the same page with this, not only from a sexual piece, but a relationship piece. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. There's all kinds of couples nowadays, those that met when they're 20 years old and they, dated and then they're 30 and they're 40. Right. There's a lot of people who got in that situation, divorced, now they got remarried at 40, 50, widow, that type of situation. But again, I'm a big picture thinker, and if you step back from it and you look at it and go, at 20 years old, the way you look and feel and your life experiences it's a certain way, and then when you're 30, it changes and looks a different way, and when you're 40, it changes and looks a different way. And if you don't have throughout that entire kind of lifespan of a relationship, if you're as a 20-year-old, you loved each other as 20-year-olds, right? But then there was the change that happened or changes that happened when you're 30. Does this 30-year-old male still like the 30-year-old female? In these different
growing through these seasons.
Correct.
Together,
and so when it does, it's not a if, it's when your health starts changing, when your hormones start changing, you change. I mean, your hormones I say this all the time, your hormones are who you are.
That's right.
And if your hormones are not right, you're not right. You're not right as a person. You're going to interact with stress differently. You're going to interact with your relationships and your conversations differently. Right. So
a little more irritable, a little more snappy, a little more.
And I mean, if you're fighting and then you turn around and go, "Hey, do you want to go make love?" It generally doesn't work that.
No,
I mean, sometimes it does. Depends on how you.
Definitely doesn't for the women. Trust me, guys can probably.
Depends on how you roll, but whatever. Exactly. We'll leave that one alone. It's a family show.
Yeah.
But those are the times where you're just like, you'll notice a huge difference. And you've got to be able to be, synced, in sync from that standpoint. And we've done better over the years, I think, of knowing, because of our regime and that the way that the, Evexias method really works in keeping people optimized for longer periods of time. We don't have these big, now all of a sudden we're looking at each other going, who are you? What's wrong with you? Because we know that. And so that's one of the things that we teach all of our practitioners, right, is, hey, you have to learn how to do this therapy properly.
Right. And then, you also said something key just now, and you said, we do multiple things. And it's true. It's not a one-trick pony. Sure. I mean, relationships take work. I mean, this isn't just magically you get your hormones fixed and everything's perfect again. No, of course. I mean, I've had, women come in and say, all right, I'm feeling great now. What resources do you have to undo the damage that has happened over the last 10 years when I didn't like my husband? Sure. Seriously, this is real. That's where, a lot of resources like ExoMarriage and some of the other resources that we have utilized ourselves have really come into play. It's really important to understand it's multifactorial. But what I've heard you say, and I've heard other people say, and I've felt it myself, is once you get your tank full and you have the capacity to manage or deal with the stressor of what might be a dysfunctional or a became dysfunctional relationship, now you're more open to other avenues to get the help that you need, I would imagine. So,
well, there's effort involved, right? There's effort involved. And, I would say to the audience, there's nothing I can do about the last 10 years when you were like that. So we can't look in the rearview mirror. Right. There's a reason why the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. Let's look forward. So I'm not going to stress on that. I'm not going to say, well, coulda, shoulda, woulda. We just work on it. But now, because their effort is required. But I have the energy and the mindset now, the clarity of mind to go, you know what, I am going to put forth the effort because this is worth it to me. Our relationship is, this is worth to me. I'm going to go ahead and invest the time, the energy, the effort, the resources into solving that, whatever issue that you're having, or issues, put it that way. A lot of times there's not just, one thing, but getting back on track. I mean, I was just explaining to somebody earlier in the studio, when you have a hole in the roof of your house, do you start when it's, this big? Do
you get it fixed when it's
and you fix it? Or do you wait until you have this, just massive problem and now you've gutted the inside of the house and the electronics and the couch and the rug and everything else? And it just makes logical sense. But again, if people understand why am I doing this and what am I addressing? I'm not just addressing sexual function. I'm not just addressing, erectile dysfunction. I'm not just addressing hot flashes for women. I'm addressing my whole overall being as a person that allows me to be the person that God's designed us to be.
That's right. One of the things that, you just mentioned, I really want to make sure people understand. I've talked a little bit about this before, but this isn't just something that happens when a guy turns 50, right? So you talked about, being at 39 and then, your magic number was when I'm 40, I'll get this checked out. But we're seeing it's happening younger and younger. So, kind of speak to that as just this age perspective and kind of overcoming that myth, I guess, or misconception that this is something of older.
Yeah, I am, we're in this business, in the healthcare business. And you see when you bring in you bring 30-year-olds in now and their testosterone levels are so depressed. And there's a myriad of reasons. I'm sure you'll talk about that on either other episodes that you do. But, sleep, processed food, phytoestrogen, xenoestrogen, things that we're just ingesting that are depressing hormone levels. And because hormones are so important, specifically testosterone, when those are low, and it's happening. So I don't put an age on it. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to treat my cancer until I'm 40. If I have cancer around 30, well, that makes absolutely no sense. Right. So why would I not treat hormone deficiency in my 30s if I have hormone deficiency in my 30s? Right. Then conversely, you have a guy that comes in as 55, 60 years old. You take his blood and you go, good Lord, you're 800 and you're free as this and you're that. And you could use a little bit of this or a little bit of that and, away you go. But just that's something that I would just tell people. Like, it does not make sense to only treat disease based upon age. If you have a disease when you're 30 years old or 25 years old, treat it. Right. If you don't have the disease when you're 40 years old, don't treat it. Right. Now, so it's very, and people I hear that all the time when I talk to people. It's like, well, I'm not old enough, or when I get older. I was that person. Yeah. I was the person that said, when I'm 40, I'm going to get to 40. It just doesn't, it's not like that. Well,
the last thing that just popped in my head, because it's kind of funny, is I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you don't have to answer this question, but you can. But one of the things that women are a little afraid of bringing their husband in to get their testosterone levels checked is now all of a sudden they're going to be running around the house and chasing them everywhere and wanting to have all this, I'm just like, no, it's not like that. I mean, it's not.
What's wrong with that?
I know. That's what I said. I'm like, is that a problem? What's the problem with that? But a lot of women really have this fear that, oh my gosh, this is, going to be so intrusive, especially if he's retired. She's like, you're already here too much. What's happening? But as far as the sexual function goes, I personally wouldn't say that it's worse or crazy or, oh my gosh, this, that, or the other. But from a male perspective, just because this question is not asked enough, but it's thought of a lot, is what are the sexual changes that may come from it? Maybe it's just all mental. Maybe it's mental and physical. Like, what are things that you would say are a benefit, but to not worry the ladies? I guess
that's it. So what comes to my mind is modality, right? Of what is your form of testosterone? If you're doing a shot, which again, there's pluses and minuses on different modalities, but if you're doing a shot, you're getting this huge dump of hormones into your system that's going to be metabolized within 72 hours, 3 or 4 days. Well, of course, you're going to hit this, massive peak. This is why we like the Evexias method with pellets. And then again, you could say pellet therapy, but what type of hormone therapy or pellet therapy are you doing? Because we've spent decades creating a better pellet so that you don't have this big drug dump. And I think to answer that question really succinctly and simply for the audience, it's the modality. So if you're on pellet therapy using the Evexias method, you're going to get this nice gradual up to get to that point. And then when you're at your body has gotten used to it on the way up. So you don't feel like you're still sexualized, you're still or sexually charged, I guess is the term. Right. Not sexualized. That's not the right term. But you feel that, right? But it's not, you've gotten there gradually. So you don't feel like, oh my gosh, you wake up one morning, you're just like, I'm, just ridiculously horny.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I find that more with women.
That is true. That is true. I mean, I know what you're saying. So what he's saying is that, low libido is a big problem for women more than men. So there's a difference. Men don't rarely lose desire. Women lose desire. Men lose more function or the worth it equation in the brain because it takes a lot of mental energy for a man to, just like women, to go there and get there. But women fully lose desire. I mean, I have had women say, I'd rather, eat my toenails than have sex, right? That's a problem in a relationship. Yep. I tell women all the time, guys can handle you being cranky and, moody and, all these other things. But all of that and withholding sex is like kind of a deal breaker.
It's problematic.
Guys can deal with a lot of the mood issues as long as your sex life is
and that's why I think, you look at the average divorce age of people 40s, and there is a direct correlation between the decrease in hormone production and hormone optimization and the increase in divorce.
Right. And it happens sooner and more powerfully in women than it does in men. I think it starts in women in like our mid-30s and definitely worse in our 40s and then worse in our 50s. And then for men, it kind of is super gradual until your 50s. So there's this kind of difference in the rate at which it happens. So anything else before we wrap it up that we didn't talk about? We talked about the brain. We've talked about, sharing wisdom and energy and focus and mental clarity and, joint pain and, all this stuff. Is there anything else from the male perspective that you would want to share that would be important?
There's a lot. I mean, we've kind of scratched the surface on this, but the kind of the overall takeaway message with it is, don't wait until you are just terribly symptomatic, because the road back and the damage that is caused all along that way. Go in and get yourself checked out and at least identify the problem, and then take it in stages. Again, going to one of our Evexias providers. I mean, we have practitioners all across the United States. I think we've trained 4,500 or something like that. So they're all over the place. But so the first thing is don't wait. Don't wait until it's really terrible. Secondly, acknowledge that the benefits are not just in one area, right? They're multifactorial, multifaceted. And the third would just be think about the impact that you have on other people's lives, whether it's your family, whether it's coworkers, whether it's your parents, whomever. There is a huge impact on that you have to give to people, that you have as an individual, men, especially men and women. But in this day and age, and you hit on it earlier, and I'm passionate about that, teaching men to be men the way that God designed them to be is so lost on society. Right. And we have, 5 daughters between the two of us, and some of them are engaged and getting married. Some are in relationships. Some are not. And they're frustrated with trying to find men that are men. So we're passionate about that. We see it from the other side. So those are the three things that I would say would be a takeaway. So.
Awesome. Okay, well, hopefully you gleaned a little bit of the male persuasion in this conversation. And thanks for joining us today. And we'll continue the conversation and have you on for some other male points of view, because I think it's good to bring that into the conversation. Thanks. Join us again next time.